and welcome to Next Gen PA. My name is Samuel Pimentel. Today I'm joined with
Michelle Angert
and a very special guest,
Durre Sharif,
who works at Church World Service in Harrisburg, which main goal is to help resettle people into the Harrisburg area to hopefully have a better life. And Durre, let's just start with, what do you do and sort of what's kind of the overview of the things you're involved with and the sort of services that Church World Service provides as well?
that is a meaty question. What do I do? So let me start with some facts. In the world right now, there are something like 120 million people who are displaced. Of those 120, something like 27 or 30 million qualify as refugees. So in order to qualify as a refugee, you have to have fled your home because of a well-founded fear of persecution on the basis of race, religion, political opinion, etc., and are unable to return home. So that's what qualifies someone as a refugee. So when somebody has fled home, they go to the UN High Commissioner's office in whichever country they've fled to, and they submit an application to be recognised as a refugee. It's essentially an asylum application. So they claim asylum in that country, and in the questions that are asked in this asylum process, determine whether or not, if it's granted, rather than asylum being granted, refugee status is granted. Once refugee status is granted, our friends have to wait in a refugee camp for years until things are processed and it's their turn. So something like 50 nations participate in the refugee program. The US by far is the biggest participator in the refugee program. And what I mean by participator is I mean that every year the President of the United States sets an admission ceiling for the number of refugees that will be allowed into the US. And the US historically has really championed this program. Anyone that's part of the United Nations essentially has to participate in the program because it's a part of what they've signed up to do. So after this wait, and the average amount of time, for example, people from the DRC, their average wait in a refugee camp is between 20 to 25 years. Our friends that arrived from Syria have been waiting on average between 10 and 15 years. From Afghanistan, between 2 to 5 years, and so on. So it depends on the person, but they get told, okay, it's your turn. There's extensive background stuff that happens, but when it's their turn, their case gets sent to the US. There are 10 national non-profits that meet twice a week. And when they meet, they look at all the cases that have been approved for travel to the US, and they distribute it amongst themselves. So CWS is one of those 10 agencies. The admission ceiling this year is 125,000. I think about 60% of that is through the refugee program rather than other programs. So it's a massive amount. It's like 70,000 refugees are divided between these 10 agencies. The ones that CWS gets, they divide it between their 40 or so offices across the US. I am one of those offices. Our stated capacity, so the number of refugees we are planning on welcoming this year. Okay. Our fiscal year goes from October 1st to September 30th. So the last fiscal year 23 that ended in September, we were at 110 refugees for the year. The start of this fiscal year, we said, okay, let's double that. Let's go to 250. We've increased again. We're at 440. So this is historical for us. But basically, that's kind of the history of what the process looks like. But then we get a notification that, oh, all right, you're 440. Here's someone. So I look at the case and we accept the case. And then it's just a matter of waiting for travel to be booked, for them to have final processes they go through in the refugee camp. But basically, we are responsible for restarting their lives, and this restart has been divided into 26 core services that we have to deliver in 90 days of case management. So that is everything from picking someone up from the airport, submitting compass application for an EBT card, medical assistance, food stamps and all of those things, finding them a job, finding them ESL classes, registering kids in schools, finding them a home, clothing, grocery supplies, everything you can imagine to restart your life, all boiled down into this list of 26. And we have 90 days to do it, and we have approximately $1,000 per refugee so we rely very, very heavily on community support to supplement what we have to deliver. I think that realistically, everything that we end up providing for each refugee client, I would say maybe 30% of it is federally. Like, we get through federal funds, and the other 70% is through community partnerships, donations, and things like that. So that's what I do. I manage that, there's in that initial arrival period after a refugee comes to the country for either a 3-month case management period. Some people get 8 months, depending on if they qualify for an employment program, and community engagement, which is all about getting those additional resources to help us plug that gap between what we're funded for and what we actually need.
I think that was a really wonderful overview, and you hit a lot of the topics that I was going to ask in my questions. But I guess one of the things I wanted to ask was, how does Church World Services differ from other sort of refugee resettlement organizations that are out there? What do you guys do differently?
So, we're fortunate that the network amongst other resettlement agencies is quite communicative. We have, regional gatherings and national gatherings and things like that. And I think one of the things that Church World Service Harrisburg does exceptionally well is client-focused events and programs. So this is almost, it's considered extracurricular, I think, for a lot of agencies, but we find it necessary to organize things like this, because if our goal is the refugee becomes fully integrated in the community, the way to do that is to do refugee-focused events. So last weekend, we partnered with Messiah University, and we chartered 4 school buses. Each school bus did 4 separate stops, and we picked up a ton of refugee clients and drove them all to Messiah University. And something like 15 students organized a family fun day for all of our clients. So we had classic games like, 3-legged races and father-son races, and everyone was divided into teams and a huge field, and every game was run by a different Messiah student. And we had, people donated us food, Giant donated food, Olive Garden donated food, all these people that they're just, our community is a very welcoming community. But what was lovely was that, our clients, they've been in prison, or they feel as though they have been in prison when they've been in these camps for so long. So for them to have a day that wasn't focused on rebuilding, but on recharging, was really wonderful for them. The feedback we got was incredible. They just kind of hung out, got to know each other. I think it's always difficult to kind of onboard volunteers as fast as you need them. But if you allow the client community groups to support one another, they will bring themselves up together, right? Because you've got people who are, even if it's someone who's been here 1 month more than you, they're still a month ahead, and they can guide you. Oh, right, you're going to your doctor's appointment. This is what's going to happen. And make sure that thing in your back, say it now, like whatever it might be. So I think that's something that I know other agencies don't do. And I think that we do really, really well, is just, putting our clients first, putting their well-being first. And I think that it has a knock-on effect on our team, where, there's such a high rate of burnout in social work, that people are very, very careful not to overburden staff and ask them to do anything in addition to what they're already doing. But when we organize events like this, our team willingly participates, and we find that these are the events that prevent burnout, even though it's on the weekend. That kind of reminder of their why. Like, why am I doing this? I think when things get difficult, when things get stressful, that's what carries you through, is when you find meaning and purpose in the work that you do. So I think that's something that CWS Harrisburg does really well as well.
So from what I've heard, is it sounds like there's a lot of great community surrounding your clients, and I'm curious, what is that transition period, say, from if they came from, as you mentioned, DRC, somewhere along those lines. How does that period go from transitioning to that to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania? So I imagine there's quite a difference. It's quite culturally different. So I'm curious, what's the process for making sure they can get acclimated to the new environment?
So the process for acclimation is, just encouraging them to go out for walks and explore their community. I think that there are some things that you don't want them to acclimatize to. I think that there are some things we can really learn so much from them. We find that our clients are some of the most grateful people in the world. They also, the children, they're not obsessed with screens. They love to be outside. They love to play football. They love community. You can't drive by the house to drop off a piece of paper. They will insist that you come in for a cup of tea and spend time with them. So I think more than anything else, like I feel like we learn from them, and we gain from them, and like pick up some of the beautiful things about their culture. But otherwise it's almost like, when you do a language course and you do like an immersive language course, that's what it's like for them during the resettlement period. Like, this is immersive. In terms of kind of helping them adjust and acclimatize, they are immersed. So it's just kind of encouraging them, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to explore. Don't be afraid to, give us a call if there's anything that you need. But also, make friends with your neighbors and make friends with your fellow community members. We purposely house refugees from certain communities on the same street as others. So we have a street in Harrisburg with another street parallel behind it. And between those two streets, we've got 5 Syrian families of like 10. So they're right there with each other. We've got 9 Pakistani families, all in like a 6-block radius of each other. And we took them all out to recycle bicycle. And now they've got a little biker gang. I saw them the other day. I was driving past and I saw them, like, there's loads of them. I'm like, where are you guys going? They're like, oh, we saw a sign for like some job openings, so we thought we'd go and explore. So I think that's really, really helpful as well, just to kind of help them adjust, but still hold on to the things that make them uniquely special.
Yeah, I was going to ask the question of whether you tried to keep communities together. So if you had lots of immigrants from different countries, you try to keep them together. So that's nice to hear that they, even though it is such a new thing coming to a new country, new culture, you still at least have those people around you sort of can support you, which is nice.
We have some really amazing team members, like like a housing team, who passionately and vehemently believe that needs to come first. So even if it means more work for her, she's like, no, I'm going to keep going until I find something in this particular area, which is exceptional. And again, it goes back to our team being a team that have, like, their why is at the forefront of what we do.
So, as you mentioned, you guys only get $1,000 budget per person, correct?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay. I'm just curious, how do you make the most of that money and make sure that you can get them a home, as well as have them keep a home? And sort of that process, what would that look like?
It's tough. I mean, it's a little over 1,000 per person, and this money has to stretch for the 3-month resettlement period. Ideally, we would use that to pay all rent, all utilities, groceries, clothing, transportation for 3 months, and it's a really, really difficult thing. We partner with places like the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, who do weekly deliveries to our clients who haven't yet received their EBT cards or food stamp cards yet, and they're so thoughtful. They do things like, that they've got their own halal pantry now within the food bank, and they've got their own refugee or new neighbor pantry where they've got lots of lentils and rices and other things that they know that our clients prefer rather than the typical canned goods. Then we partner with another organization called PA Furniture Mission, we pay for delivery, and they will fill a house for us. They will make sure that a house has a bed, a mattress, a side table, coffee table, like all those sorts of things. They help us. They go and they get it done. Pashk, the guy that runs PA Furniture Mission, is from Albania and is really, really passionate about helping those in need, and used to work with a big organization out in Chicago, and has he's established one here now. So he's fantastic. And we've just got a lot of, there's a in Mission Central, there's a computer ministry. And when you visit, Mission Central is this awesome non-profit organization in Mechanicsburg. But if you go to visit their warehouse, they've got in the back corner of their warehouse, and it's pretty huge, there are all these retired IT guys, and they go there as volunteers and they refurbish old computers. And you can go to this computer ministry, and for the cost of the license for the computer, they give you a laptop. There's no questions asked, and it's for anyone that's in need. So we get laptops for our clients so they can apply for jobs. They can do ESL classes on there and things like that. So really, it's just building these community partnerships. That's what helps us make that money stretch as far as possible. And then, of course, in-kind donations. We've got a huge network of volunteers who give up their time and donations for us. Every mile of volunteer drives is worth a certain amount of money according to the federal government, which we can report and raise matching funds for. So that helps us a lot. Every hour that they spend with our clients is worth a monetary amount. So that's incredible when we are able to report things like that. But also that, like the Vietnamese Alliance Church, for example, they reached out and said, "What do you guys need?" I was like, we really need things like, nappies, paper towels, personal hygiene items. And a week later, we had like 3 cars pull up, and our entire extension is just like floor to ceiling kitchen paper towel rolls. This is how we make it work, through these community partnerships.
So you say you get lots of your funding federally.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice any change with sort of different parties in power, different administrations? Is there sort of more or less willingness to fund, organizations such as yourself?
Awesome question. So refugee resettlement, because it's all part of the UN, and that's something that, this is something that we, as, in the US or England or wherever else, is something that we have signed on for because we believe in the principles in which the UN was established. Refugee resettlement, because we're not talking about illegal immigrants or people that are undocumented, it's always been a bipartisan issue. But the previous administration made it not so. So the refugee admission ceiling in the previous administration was the lowest, I think the lowest it's ever been, but definitely the lowest it's been in like 30 years or something. Like it's and then what happened was because there was this sudden and very, very steep drop with almost zero admissions, the entire infrastructure of all of these agencies that had been around forever just collapsed. There was no funding, there was no money. So when the President of the United States sets the ceiling for refugee admissions, obviously in setting that ceiling, they're setting the funding amount. And then that funding, the federal government don't resettle refugees themselves. They outsource to these 10 national nonprofits. So we're all paid through that. With the current administration, this administration is more pro-refugee resettlement than any administration in the last 20 years. So we kind of went from like this to, and then we went all the way up here. So like everyone is like, what is happening? So there's this sudden increase and sudden growth, and I think that there's a loss of institutional knowledge because these people who have been in this arena for a really long time, in the previous administration, all of those kind of systems and processes and agencies shut down, and now we're trying to rebuild, and it's been a lot very, very quickly. So yeah, it's definitely affecting refugee resettlement. I am of the opinion that right now the admissions ceiling is really high, and it's the highest it's ever been. Like, the gates are open. I think that every refugee resettlement agency just needs to welcome as many refugees as possible, because if we don't, that's at least another 4 years where they're not going to move. They're going to be in those camps for another 4 years, and it's easier said than done. However, I'm of the opinion that, we may not have the best ESL options for every refugee that we welcome, because, we're not able to give them one-on-one tutoring, but we're still able to give them something. We can get them a laptop from the computer ministry, and we can put them on the US citizenship website where they've got e-modules for ESL, because I think they would prefer that. Like, oh no, we don't want to resettle to the US without top-notch ESL. Like, no, just get them out, But I think, like I said, it's easier said than done. I can tell you that in the Harrisburg area, there was one other resettlement agency, Catholic Charities. They've put a pause on arrivals for a year just because it was too much too soon. So they put everything on hold. And then in Lancaster, we've got 2 other agencies, both of whom are experiencing issues and considering pausing refugee admissions as well. So, yes, it's affected us really badly. Right now it's great, but it's kind of so great so quickly without a lot of structure, without this historical structure, that it's been too much for a lot of agencies.
Unfortunately, since it's impossible to bring everyone over, what is the selection process for the people who are here? And as a second question, where do people tend to mostly be coming from, and when does the country of origin affect the decision process as well?
Okay, question number 1 is an awesome question. I would love to know the answer. I can tell you that, there are not several. There are a ton of camps all over the world, right? All of whom have refugees waiting to be resettled for, varying amounts of time. I don't know. I don't know what the selection process is. Some of them apply at exactly the same time. One person ends up being resettled in 4 years. Another one's been there 15 years. I would love to know more about it, and it's something that I've been trying to research, but so far I don't know. But I can tell you the people that we are seeing right now are mostly a Congolese population, like from the DRC, a lot of Syrians, Guatemalans, Afghans, Pakistanis, and then some people from Sudan as well. Those are the biggest populations that we've welcomed so far.
So I'm wondering if, and maybe this is too much, you're focused so much on getting the people here and getting them integrated, but do you do any sort of studies or metrics on the actual economic impacts of the new refugees to the area, and how that affects the communities and, the economics? Because I'm sure that would affect people in Congress wanting to give money.
Yeah, awesome question. So actually, we have a state refugee coordinator. She sent us a report recently. This was a nationwide report that was done over, I think, 15 years of study, or it's huge, very in-depth. A lot of research went into it. And I will send you the report to read through, because, I'm sure you guys, it's a very interesting read. But basically, the amount of money that has been spent on refugees, refugee admissions, resettlement, social security, EBT, all those sorts of things combined, the value that refugees have brought to the economy monetarily is higher than what we spent. So it's definitely, there have been these studies, and we can see that, it's so beneficial to our community. The other thing, economically to remember with the US and the UK and a lot of Western countries is that with an average family size of less than 2.4, the population structure is just not sustainable. So, if you don't, if you're looking at a triangle, you've got a downwards triangle if you're only having less than 2.4 children. And, right now there is, in the US, the over 60 population is a lot bigger than, the under 60 population, or, the next generation down, which is a concern. So I think that ultimately it's so beneficial. I think it's difficult for people to see the big picture and understand and to see the inevitability of kind of becoming a more global country, like some more globally intertwined, because I think without that, it's just not sustainable for Western nations. And without that road out of economic poverty and other things, it's not sustainable for the countries that do have lots of manpower.
I'm curious whether it's political or social, what type of pushbacks you've personally seen. And is that in the Harrisburg area, or is it just on a national scale as a whole, or potentially both?
It's just, I think the previous administration really muddied the water. It's really unfair how muddy the water became. There was never, like I said, it was always a bipartisan issue, and now, people have, they're confusing refugees, asylum seekers, undocumented people crossing the border. All of that is just one big jumble of not okay in a lot of people's eyes, which is such a shame, because it's not been that before, and it's a really difficult narrative to fight. But when you look at us as a nation, I think there's a very clear 50-50 divide between, where people stand on a lot of these issues. So I think that, we are fortunate to be in a city that is, for the most part, pro-refugee. We feel as though our refugees are welcomed. Where we've had issues are, in order to house our refugees somewhere that's affordable, in an area where a landlord is willing to rent to someone that doesn't have an employment history and doesn't have a job, credit history, all the other things that you typically need, they're not the best areas. And then you've got children who are quite innocent, that they're not, there's no street smarts there. So that's been a challenge in school. I think that in the school system there needs to be a lot of education around refugees, refugee resettlement, and empathy. But I think in terms of adults, we've been doing quite well. But I think that's also because, it's very clear what we do, and people that partner with us are going to be people who believe in what we do. And we've been fortunate not to receive any proactive backlash from people who may not support what we do.
So we've heard a lot about Church World Service and what they do, but I want to hear a little bit about your story, why you got into this work, what sort of sparks your interest to work with refugees.
So I'm going to give you a little, bit of personal history. So I'm, born and raised in London, and I've lived there my whole life. Got married to a white Jewish Pennsylvanian. I've been here for about 10 years, and it's beautiful. I've had a, very easy and very privileged life. But, there are 73 sects of Islam. 72 of them don't like this one sect because essentially, the sect that I'm a part of, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we believe that the Messiah has come. We believe that the Messiah came in the late 1880s, and because of that, so we were plodding along quite happily. The Messiah came, we believe he came to an area in India. So a lot of our community was settled in India, and then there was a partition. So the headquarters of our community moved to Pakistan because, the partition in India meant that Hindus went one way and Muslims went the other way. So we ended up, the majority of our community was in Pakistan. And then 1970s came about, and we had a president who was very similar to the previous president of the United States, who was he was all about inciting drama and hatred for your fellow man based on things that a person can't control or should have the ability to choose. So there was a law that was passed that meant that all Ahmadis were considered heretics or, disbelievers. And it's encouraged for people to persecute physically or in any other way to and violently persecute Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan. So we're not allowed to call ourselves Muslim. Graves are desecrated. We're not allowed to have mosques. We're not allowed to have a call to prayer. When a Ahmadi applies for a passport in Pakistan, one of the things on the passport application is, I hereby declare that the promised Messiah was a liar. And if you don't sign that, so you have to, you're saying, okay, yeah, I'm an Ahmadi, then it's on your passport. So it's literally, it's on your passport that this is who you are, and then your rights significantly diminish. You're not allowed to go to Mecca, to our holy land or anything like that. So it's awful. There have been many instances of like mass persecution there. People praying, being barricaded in mosques and just slaughtered. Set fire to, you wouldn't, all sorts of things. So this is my community, right? So I'm fortunate. I've not lived in Pakistan, but I've been surrounded my entire life. So I was born in the mid-80s. So my entire life. Oh, and sorry, the United Nations recognize the Ahmadi Muslim community as a persecuted minority. So they often end up as refugees and asylum seekers because the UN acknowledge the struggle that they have and how barbaric the laws are in Pakistan. So I spent my whole life around refugees. I just knew that they were people that had struggled and fought to get out of horrific conditions. But they were just my friends, they were the people I prayed next to, the people I ate with, that I did activities with and things like that. And I felt a lot of empathy for them. They're people that I have prayed for my entire life. So anyways, I was familiar with refugees, but not necessarily refugee resettlement. And then I heard that Kabul had fallen and that there are a bunch of Afghans coming to PA. And I called the leader of my mosque community and said, hey, I've worked as an interpreter before in London. So if anyone wants, I'm happy to be a free interpreter just to help the Afghan refugees coming to the area. And I was connected with the current director of CWS Harrisburg before he'd hired anyone else. It was just him. So he got a phone call saying, hey, I know you literally just opened and you haven't hired any staff yet, but there are 150,000 Afghans sitting in Fort Dix and we need to get them out. Would you be willing to resettle them on your own without a team? And he was like, yes. So not all 150,000, but some, So I went with him to those first airport pickups as an interpreter, and I just was inspired. I was in awe. The meticulous care and detail and thought that has gone into this refugee program, where every possible facet of a person's life, to have it condensed in that way into these services that can help them restart their lives, I just thought was so incredible. I thought it was incredible that a nation like the US was so pro-refugee resettlement and going to all these efforts and using taxpayers' money to make sure that the most vulnerable people in the world were resettled in the best way, that I just fell in love. And that old phrase, if you love what you do, you've never worked a day in your life. That's how I feel at CWS. Like I love what we do. I love why we do it. And, every single day I see people who they have been through the worst possible things you can imagine. I think R-rated and then some, just awful. But these are people who have surmounted the insurmountable, right? They've overcome what they thought couldn't be overcome. And you are there at that point to help them rebuild. And it's incredible. We've got like families that arrive with, like, a family of 13 from Syria, and 4 of the children have, they were classed as having mental retardation. 2 of them have epilepsy. I think 2 of them have got a parasitic disease. We have another little girl that arrived with, she's 4 years old and she weighed 11 pounds. The thing is, they were experiencing these circumstances there too. that now they're here. So no matter what they come with and what trauma they come with and what health issues they come with, we are there at that point where we're like, oh, here's medical assistance, here's a house, here's education, and we're there with them to rebuild. And it's incredible.
That is really inspiring to hear to me, the services that you guys provide. And I'm wondering, on a personal level, has your work affected you and made you, I guess, more appreciative of things and more inspired? It's just hearing about it can inspire someone, so I imagine being around it would as well.
Yeah, as a Muslim, seeing what's happening in Palestine is really, really heartbreaking. And I've got so many friends who are just kind of lost to depression right now. It's that feeling of helplessness. Like, we keep saying this isn't what we want and this isn't what we support, but no one's hearing us. And I think that if you're able to focus that on, we've essentially welcomed people who've experienced what the Palestinians are going through right now. And when you're able to support them, I really think just for your mental health, it's so good for you, and I think that it helps you to be a grateful person for sure. And just to kind of remind yourself what first world problems are and just be appreciative of the things that you have. And, this is why, back to one of the first questions you guys asked about them adjusting, I think more than anything, we adjust to their thinking. We adjust to that kind of the more simple goals in life, which is what their goals are. They're very simple, they're very grateful, and they just want to restart, and they just want to be safe, right? Like, they're not looking for looking to start a music career. They're not looking to upgrade their sneakers. It's just we just want to live in safety. It reminds you that of the basic rights that you take for granted in this country, and it reminds you of the things that make America such a fantastic place to be, and places like America in the rest of the world where those freedoms are available.
I'm just wondering if you see possibly out on the horizon sort of changes to the places that refugees might be coming from. So, now we have sort of Palestine, Israel's going to be a big issue, but you also have Sudan. And then with the rise of climate change, there's going to be islands out in the Pacific that are not going to be viable for people to live on much longer. So is there things in place for things out on the horizon, or is it much more of a reactive bringing people in, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think that refugee resettlement is slow. I think because, there's a 4-point FBI background clearance that gets done before refugees arrive. There's cultural orientation. There's all kinds of things that happen. So, even if somebody is actively in the process, it still takes like maybe 4 years. That might be the fastest that we've seen, actually, is 4 years. So I think it's easy to predict who will come through the refugee resettlement program because we're always seeing it, 4 to 5 years after a disaster. So I would say, in the next 4 to 5 years, we'd start to see some of the populations you mentioned. I think what we've gotten really good at is being reactive through other programs. So Afghans and Ukrainians have come through in different programs. There are special immigrant visa programs, and there's temporary protected status programs and things like that. They're humanitarian parolees. So I think we're getting better, but I think that those are great for those kind of huge last minute disasters where everyone needs to be evacuated. But I hope that one day we'll be at a point where we can assist the people that need it sooner.
Due to the fact that it does take 4 years, which in certain circumstances may be almost impossible, possibly long, has there been movements that you've seen or heard of to shorten this or get away to get people at least here quicker and faster, so that either that clearance will happen while they're here in an area that would be safeguarded, or that clearance would be cut down so they can get here quicker?
Yeah, so when someone has when they have a green card, if someone has a green card, you can sponsor someone to come and join you in the US. So that's one way of kind of speeding up the process. I mean, even that process takes like a year once you sponsor someone, but I mean that's so much faster. And then actually because this admission ceiling is so high, trying to get 125,000 people in just through the refugee admissions program isn't really feasible. Even if, I think even if every agency across the country doubled its stated capacity, we'd still only be 50% there. So there are other programs like Welcome Call, which has started recently, which are fantastic. So Welcome Call, there are 2 phases to Welcome Call, but one of them is that you can privately sponsor somebody who is already in a refugee camp and has a case number, or you can sponsor someone that you know. And the way that works is that, if you are a private sponsor, you have to raise something like $2,300 per person, sign a bunch of documents, do some trainings, but you can, as a group of 5 people, sponsor somebody to come to the US. So that's pretty awesome. I think the communities that need it most, it might be a bit of a challenge to raise the money, but it's not a significant amount. I mean, it's either in the grand scheme of things, so we've seen that a lot of people are really excited about this program. Many of our refugee clients who are affiliated with a church or a mosque have submitted an application to be a private sponsor group. So I think that's pretty awesome. But then, the thing is, you are relying on the sponsor to deliver those core services on their own. So if that is the route that someone's going to, we've seen, with the Ukrainian humanitarian parolees, they came through private sponsorship as well. For the most part, it went well, but there was a lot of sponsorship breakdown. We started a program called PC Gaps, where Ukrainians could come to us, who had come through the country through private sponsorship, could come to us, and we would plug the gaps in their services. That's why it was called PC Gaps. So I think that as long as there is still agency support available, I think the private sponsorship model is great. Like you can kind of shorten that wait time significantly. So far, a bunch of people I know have applied. I don't know that they've really seen much movement, but this is a very, very new program, and the expectation is, I think, maybe a year or less.
Well, Durre, this has been an absolutely wonderful conversation, and we could talk forever about these topics, but I do want to sort of bring things to a close here and give you the opportunity to do a short little plug for Church World Service Harrisburg. Tell us more about where people can go to find more information, how they can help volunteer. What do the audience need to know?
Absolutely anyone can come and help at CWS Harrisburg, because everyone is already an expert in what we need them to be experts in, which is being an American. Right? You already know how to live a life in the US. You already know how the medical system works. You know how to get around. You know how you are already the experts. We just need you to be able to share that expertise in friendship with people that really need it. And that's ultimately that's what it boils down to. It's just, that you can call and say, hey, so I was at the grocery store, but why is the same food in the same similar packet? Like, why is the price like some of them $2 and some of them like $8? And you're like, oh, brand name, off-brand, organic. Just simple things like that just blow people's minds. It's so confusing. So yeah, every single person that lives in Harrisburg is already an expert. We just need you to share that expertise with our new neighbors, and you will get so much more from it than the people that you are supporting. It's really easy to get involved with CWS. We work with anyone and we adapt to whatever you feel that you can do, and we are just grateful for any support at all. And the best way to find out about ways to get involved is through the CWS Harrisburg website.
I want to thank you again for joining us. I think your insights have been very helpful to us and the viewers, as many times when we talk about refugees and immigration and things of that nature, you can talk about it from a policy standpoint all you want, but that's quite cold. And I think you've reminded us of the human aspect, which quite frequently gets lost. But with people like you out there championing the human aspect, I think we might see a change in legislation as well as public opinion of refugees, as they're just like us. They're people. So thank you.
Yes, no, thank you so much for joining us, Durre, and I hope everyone joins us next time for Next Gen PA. Thank you all so much.
Next Gen PA is a podcast from the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg. For more information on the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg, visit our website at wacharrisburg.org.